Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. This channel was created for one purpose only, and that is to share knowledge and above all to share my passion for sugar processing. This passion has always driven me throughout my professional career. In this first video, we will look at beet sugar processing, and we will see together which parameters influence sugar extraction and how to optimize them. The purpose of a sugar factory is to extract the maximum amount of sugar from the beet with optimized costs. We will start with a brief reminder of the different steps of beet sugar processing. The first step is washing, the beets that will be washed and then sliced into cossets. The cossets pass to the diffusion step. At the end of this stage, we have pulp, which represents the exhausted cosset, and raw juice. The raw juice goes to the purification step. The role of purification is to remove as much of the impurities present in the beet through the use of lime and carbon dioxide. At the end of the purification process, we have lime cake, which is the carbonation lime residue, and we also have thin juice. The latter will move to the evaporation stage. The role of evaporation is to concentrate thin juice. At the exit of the evaporation, we have thick juice. The thick juice then goes to the final step, crystallization. At the end of crystallization, we have sugar and molasses. If we look at the sugar balance of a sugar factory, from the sugar present in the beet, we will have at the end of processing the extracted sugar, the sugar that remains in molasses, and the different sugar losses. The extraction sugar or sugar yield is the ratio between the produced sugar and the entered sugar in percent. For the classification of sugar losses, total losses are divided into two categories. In the first category, we have known or accounted losses, in which we find diffusion losses, which means sugar in pulp, and then purification losses, which means sugar in lime cake. In the second category, we have unaccounted or unknown losses. In this category, we find microbial losses are losses due to microbial infection, especially at the diffusion step. Then sugar losses due to fluming and washing of beet. And all material losses due to overflow and various cleanings. And losses by thermochemical degradation as a function of temperature, pH, and residence time. And finally, the enzymatic degradation losses due to the prolonged storage of beet and the various stresses experienced by beet. Concerning the composition of beet, it consists mainly of water at 75% of its weight and dry matter at 25%. Total dry matter is composed of sugar with an average of 17.5%, no sugar with an average of 2.5%, and finally mark, which is the insoluble dry substance up to 5%. Purity is the ratio of sugar content to soluble dry substance content consisting of sugar and non-sugar. The higher the purity, the better the sugar yield. Extracted sugar is influenced by two essential parameters. First of all, there is the technological quality of Sugarbeet, which is characterized by the sugar content, purity of the raw juice, reducing sugar's content, lactic acid content, and the natural alkalinity of the juice, which should be sufficient. The technological quality of Sugarbeet is very important. I will try to prepare a special video that will detail all aspects related to this subject. The second parameter is related to the performance of the sugar factory. First of all, there is the availability of industrial tools. It is necessary to avoid factory shutdown, which is synonymous with sugar losses. Good healthy processing is necessary to avoid microbial sugar losses. There is also control of purification parameters to maximize thin juice purity, and then the control of total sugar losses, which should be minimized. And finally, good exhaustion of molasses to minimize sugar losses in molasses. In the end, the sugar extraction is thus a function of sugar content, thick juice purity, molasses purity, and total sugar losses. We will now see the influence of each parameter on sugar yield. We will start with sugar content. We will vary the sugar content, while leaving thick juice purity fixed at 92%, total sugar losses at 0.6% on beets, and molasses purity at 57%. Note that 1 point of sugar content is equivalent to 1.2 points of sugar yield. This means that for a sugar factory that processes 1 million tons of beets with 17% of sugar content, 1 point of sugar content corresponds to 340 tons of sugar. The second parameter is total sugar losses. We will set sugar content at 17%, thick juice purity at 92%, and molasses purity at 57%, and we will vary the total sugar losses. We note that 0.1 points of total sugar losses correspond to 0.5 points of sugar yield. This means that for a sugar factory that processes 1 million tons of beet per campaign with 17% of sugar content, 0.1% on beet of total sugar losses corresponds to 880 tons of sugar. We will now study the influence of molasses purity. We will set the sugar content at 17%, thick juice purity at 92%, and total sugar losses at 0.6% on beets. We will vary molasses purity and we will see the impact of this variation on sugar yield. Here too, a point of molasses purity corresponds to 0.5 sugar yield points, which means that for a sugar factory that processes 1 million tons of beets per campaign at a sugar content of 17%, a point of molasses purity corresponds to 850 tons of sugar. And finally, we will see the influence of thick juice purity. We will set sugar content at 17%, molasses purity at 57%, total sugar losses at 0.6% on beet, and we will vary thick juice purity. 1 point of thick juice purity corresponds to 1.5 points of sugar yield. This means that for a sugar factory that processes 1 million tons of beet per campaign at a sugar content of 17%, 1 point of thick juice purity corresponds to 2,550 tons of sugar. On a scale of 0 to 100%, we note that sugar content impacts the sugar yield by 7%, total sugar losses and molasses purity impact sugar yield by 19%, and finally, thick juice purity impacts sugar yield by 55%. So to have a target sugar yield that exceeds 85%, we will essentially need a sugar content that exceeds 16%, a thick juice purity greater than 92%, total sugar losses less than 0.6% on beet, and a molasses purity less than 57%. Now, let's do synthesis and recap of everything we've seen. The parameters that influence the sugar yield, there is first of all sugar content. Sugar content is largely impacted by the technological quality of the sugar beet and then by the performance of the sugar factory, especially the availability of industrial tools, because who says factory shutdown, says prolonged storage of the beet, and risk of falling sugar content. The second parameter is the thick juice purity, which is also largely affected by the technological quality of the sugar beet and then by the performance of the sugar factory. Here again, the availability of industrial tools is essential, as a good sanitary processing condition to avoid microbial sugar losses, control of the parameters of the purification step to maximize the thin juice purity, and finally the preservation of the thin juice at evaporation to avoid the fall of the purity. The third parameter is molasses purity. It is impacted by the technological quality of the sugar beet, and by the performance of the sugar factory. A good molasses exhaustion will allow us to recover the maximum of sugar in molasses. Finally, the total sugar losses are impacted by the technological quality of the sugar beet. It is necessary to monitor the reducing sugars content in sugar beet, which is a good tracer of the degradation of the sugar beet quality. And then the performance of the sugar factory. We find the availability of industrial tools, good sanitary processing conditions, and the control of the known sugar losses, which are diffusion sugar losses and purification sugar losses. I hope this first video will be useful to you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay informed of the news. You can also download from the Play Store a calculation tool and monitoring of the various parameters of sugar beet processing. It's free. That's all for the moment. Thank you for your attention, and see you soon.